Hi, I'm Larry Magid. I'm the CEO of ConnectSafely.org, which is the U.S. host of Safer Internet Day. And I'm pleased today to be speaking with Dana Miller, who's a program and policy analyst with the Wisconsin Department of Justice. And she works very closely with ICAC, that's the Internet Crimes Against Children task forces around the country. But Dana, you can explain what ICAC is and the work that you do. And welcome, by the way.
Oh, thank you, Larry. Thanks for having me. Absolutely. So the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force is a national task force with 61 regional law enforcement task forces across the nation. We work then with local law enforcement within those regional task forces. So for instance, in Wisconsin, where I'm based with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, we work with 274 law enforcement agencies throughout our state on these ICAC cases. So dealing primarily with online child sexual exploitation.
So let's talk for a moment about the range of online sexual exploitation you deal with.
One of the most common things that we deal with is child sexual exploitation material or child pornography. It's a lot of times referred to as, and that might be self-generated by a child, or it might be enticed, it might be extorted. There's a big range even within that. And then we also deal with people trying to meet up with children and predators grooming online. We deal with some safety information around cyberbullying and, just thinking twice, posting once, all that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the issue of the child-produced images because, that's scary. But at the same time, sexting, whether you approve or not, and many people don't approve, but nevertheless, sexting is relatively commonplace, certainly among teenagers. It's a form of intimacy and expression that kids do. And the question I have is, where do we draw the line between an innocent exchange or relatively innocent exchange of images between two people in a relationship, a consensual relationship among peers, versus something that would rise to the concern of an ICAC police officer?
Yes, it's a very good question, and it's really going to depend on where you're at. They are producing illegal material, but most jurisdictions are going to look at that as if it's being consensually done, right? And if they're we'll call it age appropriate, right? They're mid-teens, that sort of thing. And there's no enticement there, there's no pressure, that sort of thing. Then that's something that, may not be looked into other than just having a safety talk and talking about the risks of that sort of thing. I think where it becomes more of a concern to us is where it's shared non-consensually, or where more is demanded then. And now I have this, if you don't do this, here's the threat, here's what I'm going to do instead. So I think those are the things where it's much more concerning, is when you've got some sort of negative impact on one of the parties because something was shared out without their consent.
And of course, that is a risk, even if the intentions at least on the part of the person who shares her or his picture, are innocent, that something can happen. Once a digital image is out there, something can be done with that image that may not be what you intended.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why we talk about the fact that once you post something, it is out there. You can't control if somebody gets hacked, if somebody saves that image and then maybe shares their account with a friend, which isn't recommended, but it can happen. And if they forgot that image is in there, now somebody else has a hold of that image. There's lots of different ways that those can get shared out. And then, we can't control what happens with it beyond that. If predators get a hold of that, and if they start collecting or trading that material, then that really ramps up that risk factor too.
And of course, the other issue is, no matter how much you feel you're in love, there is always the risk, and unfortunately, it is a risk that the relationship is going to end. And hopefully the person will be honorable, but there is that term revenge porn. I don't like the use of the word porn because it's really not about porn. It's about sharing of images that are without permission. But however you call it, there is that risk that the person could turn on you.
Absolutely. And that's with anybody. That's with teenagers, with adults, anybody. So I think that's a good safety message to keep in mind for for the general population.
Absolutely. In my youth, I certainly didn't have any of these issues, but I did have breakups, and that is part of life, unfortunately, for probably most people.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk about sextortion, which is sort of the next logical process. It's kind of what we've been talking about here, but where does that play in? And again, how and why and how serious a crime is that?
So that it's a very serious crime, and it's something that we've been seeing increasing over the past couple of years in ICAC. And I think that one of the reasons it is more serious is because it's very psychologically impactful. So what sextortion is what it sounds like. If the perpetrator has an image, or even just says that they have an image, a nude image of a child, and then uses that to demand more. I want you to send me more images or videos, or they might demand sexual activity, or even financial gain sometimes. And the threat then is that otherwise they'll share that out with their friends, and the victim's friends and family, or they'll post it to a public website, or something like that, so that they can get that content that they're demanding.
Mhm. One of the things that parents worry about, whether it's a risk in their family or not, is sexual exploitation of their child, that somebody might engage their child in a relationship and have inappropriate physical contact or sharing of images. And of course, you're much more of an expert this than I am, but from the research I've done, oftentimes it's a gradual process. It's not like somebody pops up and says, hey, let's get together tonight, or send me this image. There's this process called grooming. And I was wondering if you could explain sort of what grooming is, how it works, and if there are any signs that parents can be aware of.
Absolutely. So grooming is it's a manipulative process. It's manipulating somebody into doing what you want them to do. And it's a way that we see a lot of our cases start out. So some red flags that we might see of grooming are on the victim side anyway. They're going to be red flags of anything, right? If somebody starts spending a lot more time online, if somebody starts pulling back from activities that they used to enjoy, if maybe all of a sudden they have or they're talking about a new boyfriend or girlfriend that seems like they might be older,
Mhm.
um, if they have gifts, if they have devices that you don't know where they came from, like all of these things are red flags that we want to start checking into and find out, what's going on. Is this something that's happening in real life, that you're concerned with grades or sports or something like that, and it's impacting things? Or is this something happening online? Is there cyberbullying happening? Is there somebody grooming you and trying to entice you for images, or entice you to meet them offline? And just really checking in on where that level of concern is. But that device piece is, those gifts, that's a big one.
Mhm. And I'm thinking about also what parents say to their kids sort of preemptively, proactively, as just sort of part of that general conversation that we should all be having with our kids. You don't want to scare the living daylights out of them. You want them to feel good about their use of technology. We want our kids to be social and to be interacting with people, but at the same time, we want them to be thinking critically and not falling for these kinds of they're beyond scams, but these kinds of exploitations. What should we be saying to our kids in advance to prevent this kind of stuff?
That's that's a great question. And if we figure that out, I think we'll all be set.
Mhm.
I think that the big thing we need to be doing is having discussions with our kids about what they're doing online. And if we're tuned in like that, then we're more aware of what they're doing, who they're communicating with, what that communication looks like. And we're in a better place to kind of catch those safety risks that might happen and help our kids overcome that kind of stuff. But as far as teaching them about how to recognize this stuff, I think it's awareness. It's awareness of what it is. And it's awareness of, if something makes you feel funny, if something makes you feel uncomfortable, you can always talk to me about that. And, we can have a discussion. And if something more needs to be reported or something like that, I'm here to support you through that.
One thing I've learned in my now more than 20 years of working in internet safety is that one size doesn't fit all. Not all children are at equal risk. Not all messages are appropriate for every child. And some kids are at a higher risk than others. LGBTQ might be an example, kids who are having body image issues of whatever happened, people who are feeling isolated, maybe marginalized because of their racial or ethnic or some other aspect of them that make them an other, at least within certain parts of their community. So talk a little bit about how kids who may fit into any of those categories may be more vulnerable and what parents and the kids themselves should be watching out for.
I think that posting or sharing vulnerabilities about yourself is something that predators tend to target, because usually those people that are sharing those vulnerabilities, they're seeking something. They might be seeking support. They might be seeking friend groups or information or resources on something. They might just be seeking attention. There's a lot of different things that we reach out to other people for. And what we're seeing is that that's happening in a virtual environment now, and they're trying to seek that support online, which is great for a lot of people. There are great ways to connect and get that sort of support online. But unfortunately, when we put out a blast to all of our friend group or publicly on an app or a site, saying that we're just feeling so down because maybe mom and dad have to work a lot lately, or I really miss my friends at school because I'm learning at home for the last quarter or half year or whatever it might be. Those types of things open us up to somebody to step in and say, I completely understand how you're feeling. I've been there. I want to help you through this because I think it's important that you feel better. And then that can kind of spiral into more of that manipulative grooming behavior.
So I think what you're saying is that if you do feel that you need help and support, you should make sure you're looking in the right places, whether it's a professional or a true friend or someone who you really know you can trust versus somebody who just approaches you or who you randomly run into online.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Pick those people that you specifically know can support you, that will be there to support you, versus sending that out, as a public post,
Yeah.
maybe on an app that you're a part of.
Well, this is a subject that we could talk about for hours, and because there's just so much to learn, but we do have to wrap up. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit the resources, where people can go for more information, and also maybe first before we get to that, if you do suspect that either your child or anyone you encounter is at risk, what should you do and what should they do in terms of law enforcement and reporting?
So one of the first things that we're going to recommend to people is to report online child exploitation to the cyber tip line through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. But we have to say with that does take some time to process. So if there is an immediate need, if there are threats of violence or harassment or those types of things, you really want to be reaching out to local law enforcement with that. So maybe there's a school resource officer, or a counselor that can help get you in touch with the right officers to be able to help you with that situation, so that you aren't waiting for assistance on those types of things. You can also report abuse on platforms or websites, on apps themselves. And again, if that's a terms and conditions violation, they'll take care of it internally. If it involves online child exploitation or something that's illegal, they will then go ahead and report that cyber tip and get law enforcement involved.
And if I might add, if you do have to contact law enforcement, I hope it doesn't come to that, but if you have to, be proactive if you don't get the kind of response that you feel you need. Because although police departments are getting better and better over time, there are still some officers that just don't have the training or the information that they need. And if you have access to an ICAC task force, of course, you would get excellent help. But if not, just make sure you're getting an officer who can really, take it seriously.
Yeah, technology is overwhelming. It's overwhelming for all of us, even in ICAC sometimes.
Mhm.
So if you feel like it's not being taken seriously or being handled the way that you would expect it to be if it's illegal material, please take a look at our ICAC website at icactaskforce.org. And there's contact information for all the regional ICAC task forces on there. And we can get you in touch with somebody that is trained up in responding to ICAC concerns and ICAC cases, and make sure that it is being appropriately responded to, whether it was during that initial contact or as part of the follow-up with the ICAC.
And also, just to add, we have some resources at ConnectSafely.org, but I know there's a lot of resources at your sites. And of course, missingkids.com, which is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, has a great many resources. So we will have links for all of that. Dana Miller, thank you very much. We really appreciated this information, and I wish you the best in your very important work.
Thank you, Larry. Happy to be here.